The McAlvany Weekly Commentary, covering monetary, economic, and geopolitical news events. Now here are Kevin Orrick and David McAlvany.
Welcome to the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. I'm Kevin Orrick along with David McAlvany and our guest today, Jim Deeds.
Kevin, we are in the office talking all the time about economic concepts, financial market events, and the conversations are always very stimulating, very informative. The conversations that we've had through the years with Jim Deeds have also been stimulating, informative, and we are excited to have that conversation now open to our listeners. Jim has 20, 30 years experience on Wall Street, worked with us for close to a decade here at ICA, and is just a fantastic thinker, writer, contributor to the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor. And you'll see his special articles from time to time, and we'll be looking at one of those articles in June. We're here today to talk about, are we there yet? Hyperinflation. What is it? How do we get there?
Yeah, the great idea was that most people in this country really don't know what hyperinflation is. Hyperinflation, if you mention it to most people, they'd say, I don't know what that is. Or if they did, they'd say, doesn't that mean when inflation goes up to 10 or 12 or 15%, maybe like what happened in America back in 1970? And if that were true, then doesn't the government come in and fix it right away and everything's okay? And I think, honestly, that probably 90% or more of American people would say that and then go on about their life. But in truth, hyperinflation, although it's amazingly rare in anyone's life, I haven't seen any hyperinflation in my lifetime in America, so it obviously is rare to me. And yet, if you look at a history book, you would see that hyperinflation comes regularly in different parts of the world and actually started way, way back with the Romans. And you know, in the article you just mentioned, that was the first point I started with, was the fact that in the beginning, the Roman Empire was initially using gold and silver coins, and then everybody figured out that they could carve the edges off the silver and the gold coins and save a little gold and silver for themselves. Then the government did that, and of course it proceeded from there to the point, and this went through several different Roman emperors, proceeded to the point where the Roman emperors would dilute the gold and the silver and the coinage and continually dilute it in order to pay for the things they wanted to pay for. So the Roman Empire, believe it or not, probably because they totally diluted and destroyed their money.
Jim, let me ask you a question, because you had mentioned in your article just how quick this comes on. I think sometimes people think that if they don't see high inflation first, they're not going to see hyperinflation. But you had quoted Frederick Kiesler, who was a law professor at Harvard, who said it came in like lightning in less than a week.
Right. Yeah, that was amazing. You know, when Kiesler said that, he said, and then this is his quote, he said, it was horrible, like lightning struck. No one was prepared. You cannot imagine the rapidity with which the whole thing happened. The shelves in the grocery stores were empty. You could not buy anything with your paper money. This goes on over and over in history, but Germany, for us at least, is really a neat twin, perhaps, we hope not, to look at. And what Harry Figge did the same kind of a study back in the 70s and the 80s in South America. They had, in different countries down there, repeated hyperinflations. And one of the really strong statements in his book was the fact that hyperinflation strikes within 5 to 10 days very often. Very often you can go from a normal way of life and normal business as usual into a total frantic hyperinflation climate within 5 or 10 days.
Which is really the destruction of a person's lifetime savings if they're in a particular currency that's hyperinflationary, right?
So, Jim, illustrate that for us. What does $1 million look like in the midst of a hyperinflation?
Well, leading into that, you have to think of the psychological thing that happens, and then I can give you that answer because it's pretty amazing. What you're really talking about, and this is kind of the fun of thinking about where we are today, for that to happen, you have to stop trusting people. You really do. And if you stop trusting people, then the money is no good, and you're trying to get rid of your money. The money in this case is paper money, or maybe it's clad coin. And any reason that you look at it, you'd say the money is just worthless. It doesn't make any sense to me anymore. And that leap from trusting to no trust can happen, as we say, in 5 or 10 days. And it's a psychological happening that can happen all across the country, and perhaps this time, which is really amazing, all across the world, since most countries have their financial reserves in dollars. To answer your question, because I did this, I was trying to come up with things that would help individual people realize how critical it is to at least give hyperinflation some thought. If you take $1 million, if you're one of the super wealthy in America today, or wealthy as it turns out because numbers have shrunk a lot, and you have $1 million in savings today, if, as in Germany, and this has happened in many other countries, in Germany during the latter part of hyperinflation, prices doubled every day. The price of sugar would double, the price of coffee would double, the price of a vegetable would double every day. If that were to happen here, then $1 million would be reduced in 10 days to $850 in purchasing power, which is really a shock, but you can work it through and that's what you get. If you look at the average American family, maybe just middle-income family today, and maybe they've got $60,000 in life savings right now. Life savings denominated in dollars, I'm saying, that they haven't been paper dollar denominated savings. Within 10 days, their life savings would give them $57 in purchasing power.
You know, Jim, we're hearing from the Federal Reserve. In fact, the Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank President Sandra Pianalto said Tuesday that inflation remains a top risk to the economic outlook, but that the Federal Reserve's rate-cutting strategy likely would not stoke inflationary pressures. She's talking about how we really don't have inflation yet. Oil's up 30% this year. It's at $126 a barrel. You know, gold is 3 times what it was 5 years ago. CRB index is up 19%. Can we trust what's being told us by the officials right now, or are we already experiencing? Your article says, are we there yet? Are we experiencing the beginning factors of this?
You know, I think, Kevin, that's a guess. I mean, obviously, because nobody knows the future. But the scariest part, all of us, or a number of us at least, know the past. We do know history. And on a historical basis, you would have to say we're teetering on the edge right now. I could answer maybe what you asked in 2 ways so that it would take it off my shoulders. Number one, I read a lot. I read the best conservative writers I know of, which doesn't mean it's all of them by any means, but the best ones I've gotten to know over the years. I read them every week, and probably from those writings, to me, and I'm saying it straightforward, the shocking thing within the last 2 months is that many of those writers have swung across the line. They've never used the word hyperinflation before in their writings, and all of a sudden that word shows up. So all of a sudden, at least in their subconscious, they're realizing that perhaps we're on the edge of something like that. I don't know if that's an answer to your question or not.
One of the things that Kevin and I have talked about a couple times just in private conversation is with the massive amount of dollars outstanding, not just currency holdings, but also, treasury paper throughout the world. You've got the Chinese, which have $1.6 trillion in foreign currency reserves. Majority of that is U.S. dollars. The Japanese with $1 trillion in foreign currency reserves, again, mostly U.S. dollars. The Russians now with $529 billion. These are astronomical numbers. Now, the Russians have actually been shaving back on their dollar exposure significantly over the last 2-3 years. The conversation that Kevin and I have had is essentially we exist in a state of hyperinflation today if you allowed all of the dollars to be put on the market.
Right.
But they're happily sitting in foreign central banks. They're happily sitting in our safety deposit boxes, in our money market accounts, in our this, that, and the other form. They're stuffed away because, as you said, trust is still there.
Yep. There's 2 things, and it's fascinating. The trust is there, and the second thing is they're really woven into the web. We got them. And I think that's the scariest thing of all, because what you just said, if you look, I'm just quoting what I've read other places, but I believe it to be correct. If you look at the American dollar that you've got in your wallet, truthfully, 65% of the printed American dollars are circulating outside of the United States. That's the first thing you have to realize. So those people have no tie to America. They have no tie to anything, Abraham Lincoln, you name whatever you've got, the Buffalo Bills or the Dallas Cowboys. They've got no allegiance to anything in this country other than the fact that at the moment they trust the American dollar as much or more than they do their own currency. That's around the world. Secondly,